In the remote village of Mbandu, the rhythm of life itself was music. The people said the land breathed in melody, the trees rustled in harmonies, the rivers hummed in low tones, and even the wind carried the distant heartbeat of drums. Every child was welcomed into the world with a rhythm played on carved wooden drums, and every soul that departed was sung across the river to the ancestors through mournful chants. In Mbandu, silence was a wound, it was the absence of life. It was into this world of song that Nyoka was born. On the night she came into the world, the sky trembled with thunder that rolled like deep drums. Her mother, weary but smiling, held her close as a soft cry left the baby's lips, and the entire hut seemed to shimmer with light. The midwives gasped. Her cry didn't sound like a newborn's wail. It was music, a note so pure that it made even the storm outside quiet down to listen. The villagers later said the wind paused for her voice, as though the heavens themselves leaned closer to hear. As Nyoka grew, her voice became the pride of Mbandu. When she sang, crops swayed even when the air was still. Sick children who heard her songs woke with color in their cheeks. The old men who played flutes and drums swore that her melodies had something divine in them, a whisper of the first sound that ever touched the earth. Her mother, with eyes full of pride, used to say, "Her soul sings louder than her breath." But joy in Mbandu never lasted long. When Nyoka was 9, her mother fell ill. No song could cure her this time. No prayer, no rhythm could change what fate had written. On her deathbed, her mother held Nyoka's small hands and said, "Never let the world silence you, my child. Even when they break your voice, let your bones remember the tune." The words carved themselves into Nyoka's heart like sacred markings. After her mother's death, the drums of Mbandu fell silent for 7 nights, a sign of deep mourning. The villagers wept, but they comforted themselves knowing that Nyoka's voice would one day bring back their joy. Yet, the silence that followed her mother's passing carried something cold within it. Her father, the chief of Mbandu, could not bear his loneliness. His grief made him weak, and weakness, the elders said, attracts the wrong spirits. It was not long before a woman came from the northern hills, Queen Leone, draped in silver cloth and heavy silence. Her beauty was sharp, her gaze still, and her words carried no rhythm. When she spoke, the air around her seemed to stop moving. The drums that used to echo around the chief's hut were ordered quiet when she entered. "Silence is the mark of power," she said. "Noise belongs to the poor." At first, the villagers were cautious but respectful. They had never known a queen who hated sound. But Queen Leone was not just a woman, she was a presence that drained warmth from the air. Her shadow fell long and cold. She dismissed the drummers who used to play at dawn and banned the children's songs that used to welcome the sunrise. Slowly, laughter and melody began to fade from Mbandu, replaced by a stillness that crept through the streets like fog. Nyoka felt it first, that ache of quietness pressing against her ribs. Her father changed too. His smiles became few, his voice softer, his eyes clouded by the queen's whispered rules. She told him that songs distracted the people, that silence brought discipline, that quiet was closer to the gods. One morning, when Nyoka hummed by the river, her stepmother appeared behind her. The woman's shadow touched the water first, stilling its flow. "Your voice," Queen Leone said, her tone smooth but cold, "it disturbs the spirits. You will learn to keep it inside you." Nyoka turned, frightened but brave. "The river loves my songs," she said softly. "Even the wind listens." Leone smiled, a thin curve of disdain. "Then let them miss you." From that day, Queen Leone forbade Nyoka to sing. She called her voice witchcraft, claiming it cursed the quiet peace she had brought. The villagers whispered in fear, not of Nyoka but of the queen's power. They watched as the little girl who once sang joy into the air now walked in silence, her lips trembling with melodies she could no longer release. But when the moon was high and the village slept, Nyoka would sneak to the edge of the forest. There, under the watchful eyes of stars, she would whisper fragments of songs, broken notes, soft as wind through reeds. The air would shimmer faintly, like the earth itself missed her sound. The songs of Mbandu had not died. They were only waiting, quietly, inside Nyoka's heart. Queen Lelo's jealousy grew like a weed choking the roots of peace. Every time she heard even the faintest hum from Nyoka's lips, her eyes would harden, and her hands would twitch as if holding invisible chains. The girl's voice, once a blessing to the land, had become a curse to the queen's pride. Leone could not stand that the very thing she hated, sound, still dared to live in her house. The villagers whispered behind closed doors that Queen Leone had not always despised music. Some said she had once been a great singer from the northern hills, a woman whose songs could summon rain and tame tempests. But during a festival she had sung too proudly, claiming her voice was brighter than the river gods themselves. In her arrogance, the spirits took her gift, leaving her throat hollow and her heart bitter. Since then, it was said, she had vowed that no other woman's song would rise above silence again. Nyoka, innocent and gentle, knew none of these tales. All she knew was the ache of being trapped in quiet. She missed the way her mother used to hum while pounding grain, missed the rhythm of drums at dusk, missed her own voice echoing against the hills. The silence felt like a cage around her ribs. Sometimes, when she was alone, she would cup her hand over her mouth and whisper her mother's last words, "Even when they break your voice, let your bones remember the tune." One night, unable to bear the stillness any longer, Nyoka crept outside. The moonlight dripped like silver on the ground, and the world seemed asleep. She took her small wooden flute, the last gift her mother had carved for her, and sat beside the quiet river. Her fingers trembled as she raised it to her lips. The first note that escaped was fragile, thin as a sigh. But soon the melody deepened, rising and falling like the gentle pull of a tide. The river rippled. Fireflies danced above the reeds. For a moment, Mbandu breathed again. But Queen Lelo was awake. She had been pacing her chambers, her dreams haunted by faint music that refused to die. When she heard the flute's song threading through the wind, rage flooded her veins. She followed the sound to the riverbank, her steps silent but her eyes burning. When Nyoka saw her shadow fall across the moonlight, she froze. The flute slipped from her hands. "So," Lelo said softly, her voice trembling with fury, "you still dare to sing?" Nyoka lowered her head. "I was only remembering my mother." "Your mother's songs made fools of men," Lelo hissed. "And now her daughter defies me with noise." She snatched the flute from the ground, staring at it as though it had insulted her. Then without warning she snapped it in half. The sharp crack echoed like thunder. "No!" Nyoka cried, rushing forward, but Lelo's hand struck her across the face. The world spun. Nyoka stumbled, her knees hitting the ground. Lelo's rage only deepened. She grabbed the girl by her arm and struck again, once, twice, until a sickening crack broke through the night. Nyoka screamed, clutching her arm, the pain searing through her body. The queen stepped back, panting. The broken pieces of the flute lay between them. "Now," Lelo spat, "sing for me." But Nyoka could not move. Tears streaked her cheeks as she tried to cradle her arm. Her sobs were small, quiet, until a strange sound filled the air. A hum. At first it was faint, like wind through dry grass. Then it grew deeper, fuller, a trembling vibration that seemed to come from the ground itself. Lelo's eyes widened. The sound was coming from Nyoka. More precisely, from her broken arm. Every time Nyoka gasped, her bones responded, humming, singing softly through her pain. It was not a human sound. It was older, sacred. The melody rose from inside her, flowing through the cracks of her bones like air through hollow reeds. The queen stumbled backward. "What trick is this?" she whispered. But the sound continued, rising into the air, shimmering with sorrow and beauty. The trees swayed as if listening. The river rippled again. Even the moon seemed to tremble. Nyoka's tears glowed faintly in the moonlight, her face twisted in agony, but the song, her song, did not stop. It was her mother's lullaby, carried through pain, transformed into something eternal. The melody rose higher, weaving through the night like a prayer that could not be silenced. Queen Lelo turned and fled, her heart pounding, her hands shaking as if the sound had burned her. Behind her, Nyoka's voice, or rather her bones, continued to sing softly, filling the darkness with defiance and light. By morning, the villagers found the broken flute by the river. They said the wind that day carried a tune no one had played. Some claimed they heard a heartbeat in it. Others swore it was the bones of the girl, humming what her lips no longer could. And from that night on, silence never felt safe again. At first, Queen Lelo thought it was just the wind. A faint hum slipping through the cracks of her chamber windows, rising and falling like a memory she could not silence. But as the days passed, the sound grew stronger, delicate, melodic, unbearably human. It came at dawn when the air was still, and again at dusk when the last light kissed the river. No matter how many times she ordered the guards to search the palace, they returned pale and trembling. "It is the girl," they whispered. "Her bones, they sing." Lelo's blood turned to ice. She had left Nyoka in the cellar, broken and voiceless, thinking that pain would silence her forever. Yet even beneath the heavy stones, the girl's body defied her. The song seeped through the walls like mist, haunting the air of the palace. It was a melody of sorrow and endurance, neither of this world nor the next. Each fracture in Nyoka's fragile body carried its own tone. The arm she had broken by the river hummed low like a drum, the cracked ribs sighed in harmony, and her bruised spine whispered high, trembling notes that floated like smoke. Together they formed a sound that could not die, a hymn of grief and courage. Down in the cellar, Nyoka lay in the cold darkness. The air smelled of dust and iron. Her body ached with every breath, but the pain no longer belonged to her alone. It was shared, carried outward, turned into music. She could hear it echoing faintly beyond the stones, reaching into the night. Each time her bones vibrated, she felt her mother's voice within her. "They can break you, my child, but they cannot silence what was born to sing." She smiled weakly through her tears. The song was not hers anymore. It belonged to the wind, to the people who still remembered kindness, to the ancestors who once sang for rain. Above ground, the palace servants began to hear it too. In the kitchens, the cook swore she heard a hum from the pots as she stirred the evening meal. Guards claimed their spears trembled in rhythm when the night deepened. And the maids, when sweeping the halls, would stop suddenly, pressing their ears to the walls where faint melodies pulsed like heartbeats. Soon word spread through Mbandu like wildfire. The villagers began gathering near the palace walls at night, holding their breath as the wind carried the song from deep below. It was soft, sorrowful yet strangely comforting. Mothers wept, holding their children close. Elders bowed their heads, whispering prayers. "It is her," they said. "The girl whose voice healed rivers. Even in pain she sings." They began to bring offerings, flowers, food, little wooden instruments, laying them near the gates. No one dared challenge the queen, but the silence of rebellion grew heavier with each passing night. The people no longer sang at festivals, no longer played their drums. They waited for her, for the girl whose bones sang truth. Inside the palace, Lelo could no longer sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, the melody crawled through her mind. It grew louder, pressing against her chest until she gasped. "Stop it," she screamed into the night. "Stop this cursed sound." But the song only deepened, echoing through the floors like a living thing. In her desperation, she ordered Nyoka's cell to be sealed with thicker stones. "No air," she said coldly. "No light." But when the masons returned the next day, they swore they heard the walls themselves humming, faint vibrations trembling through the mortar. "It's in the stone now," one whispered. "The sound has learned how to live." Queen Lelo struck him, shouting, "There is no magic here." Yet as her hand touched the wall, she felt it, a pulse. A slow, rhythmic beat beneath the stone, like the heart of something eternal. That night, the air itself seemed to carry the music. It drifted through the village streets, over the rivers, into the trees. The animals stirred restlessly. Birds perched on rooftops, their heads tilted, listening. Even the river, once quiet under Lelo's reign, shimmered faintly in tune, as if the water itself remembered the girl who used to sing beside it. Nyoka's melody became the heartbeat of Mbandu. Each note told a story, one of loss, of endurance, of light that refused to die. The villagers began to hum along, softly at first, then louder as courage bloomed. Children sang her name. Women wove her story into lullabies. The sound was everywhere now, unstoppable. And in the depths of the cellar, Nyoka's eyes fluttered open. She could feel the voices above her, her people's whispers, their hope blending with her song. Her pain eased. The cracks in her bones glowed faintly, golden lines pulsing like veins of sunlight trapped beneath her skin. She understood then, she was no longer broken. The music had healed her in a way flesh never could. Far above, Queen Lelo stood on her balcony, trembling. She looked toward the horizon, where dawn was breaking, the sky glowing with the same golden hue that now haunted her dreams. The air quivered with the song's final refrain, and though she covered her ears, she could not stop hearing it. A voice cannot be buried. A song cannot die. A heart once broken can still beat for the world. And for the first time in years, Queen Lelo wept, for what she had destroyed, and for the melody that refused to forget her cruelty. The Forest of Drums was a place of legend, where the trees whispered and the ground pulsed with old rhythms. When the king's soldiers dragged Nyoka there, she was weak, her arms still aching from the break that had never healed. The king, distant and hollow-eyed, signed the decree with trembling hands. His silence had grown into more than deafness. It was as though the world itself no longer wished him to hear truth. Queen Lelo stood beside him, a faint smile ghosting her lips as the girl was led away. Nyoka did not cry. As she crossed the borders of Mbandu, the wind rose around her, carrying the echoes of drums from somewhere deep within the forest. The people who loved her hid behind their doors, afraid to defy the queen but unable to look away. They whispered prayers, hoping the spirits of music would protect her. She walked barefoot on the cracked earth, her steps soft yet deliberate, like the beats of a dying song trying to remember its rhythm. In the heart of the forest, the air shimmered. The trees were old, their trunks hollow like drums, and when the wind passed through them, each one made a different tone, some deep as thunder, others high and trembling like flutes. Nyoka listened, her pain melting into awe. Though she had been exiled to silence, this place was alive with the language she understood best, the voice of sound itself. She sat by a fallen tree and hummed softly, her arm trembling. The bones beneath her skin vibrated, joining the forest's rhythm. 4 days she wandered, hungry and feverish but never alone. The air carried her hums, birds perched on her shoulders, singing fragments of her melody. Even the river joined, its flow rippling in time. Nyoka began to realize that every sound, the rustle of leaves, the creak of branches, the breath of her pain, was part of a vast, eternal song. Her voice was not gone. It had only changed form. Back in the palace, King Moyo sat on his throne, a man wrapped in heavy silence. He could see lips move but heard nothing, not even the drums that had once guided his rule. The court musicians played endlessly, but he felt only the vibration through the floor, faint and dull. At night, he dreamed of a distant hum, something pure, sorrowful, familiar. Sometimes when the torches flickered, he thought he saw Nyoka's face in the shadows, singing without sound. The dreams unsettled him, but Lelo assured him it was only guilt. Yet guilt had its own voice. It whispered in the corners of the king's mind, asking him why his daughter's name still lingered in every breeze. One evening, when a storm gathered above the palace, thunder rolled like 1,000 drums. The king stood and placed his hand upon the wall, and for the first time in months, he felt a vibration strong enough to shake his bones. The sound was faint but deliberate, like someone calling to him from far away. Meanwhile, in the forest, Nyoka discovered an ancient circle of stones carved with symbols of sound, spirals and waves that seemed to pulse when she sang. She lay her head against one stone, and it vibrated back, humming in harmony with her breath. Her bones answered, each crack glowing faintly beneath her skin. The melody that escaped her was no longer sorrowful but alive, full of strength. And far away in the palace the king finally heard, not with his ears but through his heart. A single note, rising and falling, weaving through the air like light through water. He gasped, tears slipping down his face. The servants rushed to him, thinking he was in pain, but he only whispered, "She's singing, my daughter is singing." In that moment, silence broke across Mbandu like glass. The forest roared with music and the drums of the earth began to answer. Even Queen Lelo froze, her reflection trembling in the mirror. She had silenced Nyoka with cruelty, but now every sound, every whisper, every heartbeat, carried the girl's name. The silent king wept as he rose from his throne, knowing that the truth had never left him. He had only been too deaf to hear it. And deep within the forest of drums, Nyoka smiled for the first time in years. The silence that had tried to erase her had become her greatest instrument. The world was listening again, and this time it would never forget her song. The forest of drums was vast and unending, yet to Nyoka, it felt alive, as though it had been waiting centuries for her arrival. Each night, the air shimmered with invisible melodies, and the trees whispered secrets of forgotten songs. The ground pulsed faintly beneath her feet, like a heart beating deep within the earth. She followed the rhythm through tangled vines and moonlit paths until she reached a clearing where the mist glowed with soft light. There, shadows began to move, not threateningly but with grace. Figures emerged from the fog, the spirits of old musicians, their forms translucent but glowing faintly with the colors of sound, gold for drummers, silver for flutists, blue for singers. Their eyes were deep pools of memory, carrying the weight of countless songs that had been stolen, silenced, or forgotten. They circled her slowly, the air thick with notes that had no words. The eldest among them, a spirit with drums carved into his chest, spoke first. "You carry the music of pain, child. The rhythm that cannot be destroyed." Nyoka knelt before them, her hands trembling. "My stepmother broke my bones," she whispered. "And now they sing when I move. I don't understand why." The spirit drummer smiled, a soundless curve of light. "Because pain remembers what silence forgets." He struck his chest once, and the forest answered with a deep, echoing boom. "Your bones are instruments now. You are what we once were, vessels of rhythm, born to remind the world that every wound has a voice." Another spirit stepped forward, a flutist whose breath flowed like wind. She reached toward Nyoka's scarred arm and touched it gently. "Each crack," she said, is a string waiting to be played. You must not hide from your pain. You must listen to it. That night they began her teaching. The spirits showed her how to turn breath into melody, heartbeat into rhythm, and suffering into harmony. She learned to listen not just with her ears, but with her entire body, to feel music rising from her bones like roots reaching for light. When she struck her arm gently against a hollow log, a low tone emerged. When she touched her ribs and hummed, the vibration formed a second note, harmonizing with the first. The forest began to listen too. Each day the lessons deepened. The spirits guided her to rivers where water sang when it flowed over certain stones. She knelt beside them, pressing her fingers to the current, and felt the ripples echo through her veins. The trees began to hum softly when she passed. Even the wind, once indifferent, now followed her, carrying her hums through the branches like a lullaby for the wild. Nyoka discovered that her pain was not weakness but rhythm itself. Every time her heart ached, it beat in perfect time with the earth's pulse. Every scar became a reminder that she was alive. That sound, even when born from suffering, was sacred. As she learned, the spirits began to fade, one by one, their forms dissolving into streaks of music. But before vanishing they left her gifts. The drummer gave her a pendant carved from bone, saying, "When you strike it, the forest will remember your name." The flutist gave her breath, a long exhale that entered her lungs and filled her with boundless voice. And the singer, the last to remain, touched Nyoka's forehead and whispered, "You are no longer only human, child. You are the bridge between silence and song." From that night onward the forest changed. Trees began to sway in rhythm with her steps, their leaves rustling in perfect harmony. Rivers no longer flowed aimlessly, they pulsed to her heartbeat, glittering with tiny reflections of sound. When she sang, even the stars seemed to move closer, shimmering brighter as though dancing to her tune. She built a small hut of reeds and hollow wood beside a stream. It became her stage, her sanctuary. At dusk, the air around her vibrated with soft echoes. She would close her eyes, raise her hands, and let the melodies rise from her bones, haunting, beautiful, alive. Each note called the spirits of the forest closer, each chord stitched the wounds of the land that had long suffered under silence. And though she was far from her village, she could feel Mbandu stir. Her song carried across the valleys, reaching those who still remembered her laughter. Children who once played near her home began hearing faint tunes at night, melodies that drifted through the air like mist. Some said they saw lights moving through the forest, dancing in time with the sound. Even the king, lost in his world of silence, felt the tremors. Though he could not hear, the vibrations reached his throne. His cup quivered, the walls pulsed faintly as though breathing. He clutched his chest, overcome by something he did not understand, an ache both sorrowful and hopeful. And in the highest tower, Queen Lelo stirred uneasily. She felt the rhythm too, creeping through her sleep, knocking at her dreams. The sound came from far away, but it grew louder each night, unyielding, alive. It carried a message she could not escape. The song you tried to kill still breathes. In the forest, Nyoka stood beneath the stars, her face glowing with moonlight. She raised her hands and struck the drum of her heart, and all the world answered. The forest of broken echoes was no longer broken. It was awake, alive, and forever singing the name of the girl whose bones had learned to make music out of pain. In the marble halls of the palace, silence had once been Queen Lelo's greatest weapon. She had demanded it from all, from servants who dared not whisper, from courtiers who walked barefoot through the echoing chambers, and from the king himself who had long forgotten the sound of laughter. But now that same silence had turned against her. It pressed against her like a living thing, heavy and watchful. Every quiet breath seemed to carry a sound she could not escape, a faint, trembling melody that pulsed beneath the stillness like blood under skin. At first, she thought it was memory, the echo of Nyoka's humming that she had buried in her mind. But when she pressed her ear to the walls, she heard it more clearly, a soft rhythm, distant but persistent, as though the palace itself was breathing to the beat of an unseen drum. The servants began crossing themselves in secret. Some claimed they could hear the sound too, a child's voice rising and falling with sorrow and grace. Lelo smashed mirrors in her chambers, certain they were to blame. But each time the shards hit the ground, they sang, a crystalline vibration that filled the air like the ringing of tiny bells. She covered her ears, trembling, but the melody found her through her bones. When she lay in bed at night, she could feel it, a low hum beneath her ribs, pulsing faintly with her heartbeat. Sometimes, when the moonlight struck her arm, she thought she saw faint lines moving beneath her skin, as if her own bones were remembering the girl's song. The king, old and weary, watched her unravel in silence. He had gone nearly deaf now, unable to hear the music that haunted his wife. But he could see the fear in her eyes, the way her body shook with every imagined note. "You are not well," he said one morning, his voice cracked and uncertain. "Perhaps the gods send you these sounds as a warning." Lello turned on him, eyes wild. "It's not the gods," she hissed. "It's her. The girl. The one you sent away. She lives and she sings through everything, through air, through water, through me." The king only looked away, unable to answer. By the third night, Lello could no longer sleep. She paced the corridors, her feet bare against the cold marble. The torches flickered as she passed, their flames trembling to the rhythm of something unseen. Each time she turned a corner, she thought she saw a shadow move, slender, graceful, like a dancer made of wind. And then came the mirrors. Every polished surface in the palace began to ripple. The reflection of the queen's face wavered as if disturbed by sound. When she leaned closer, she could see faint shapes moving within, trees swaying, moonlight on water, and a girl standing in the distance, her arms lifted in song. Lello screamed and struck the glass. It shattered, but as it did, a clear note rang out, high and pure, echoing down the hallways. The servants who heard it fell to their knees, believing the spirits had come to reclaim the palace. Desperate, Lello summoned her guards. "Go to the forest," she commanded, her voice sharp as broken glass. "Burn it. Burn every tree, every root, every shadow that moves. If that girl lives, I want her ashes scattered in silence." The soldiers bowed and obeyed. They marched toward the forest of broken echoes, torches in hand, their armor glinting under the pale moon. But as they entered the misty woods, the rhythm began, faint at first, then stronger, until their hearts beat in time with it. The sound came from everywhere and nowhere, from the trees, the ground, the air itself. Then came the voices. Whispers turned into harmonies, harmonies into songs. The soldiers' torches flickered and went out. One by one they dropped their weapons, clutching their ears, not in pain but in awe. For within the melody, they heard something they could not bear to destroy. Sorrow, forgiveness, love. The forest sang with Nyoka's spirit, and in that sound was the truth of everything that had been broken. By dawn none returned. Instead, a wind rose from the west, soft, fragrant, and filled with sound. It passed through the palace gates and wound through the corridors, carrying a voice that was unmistakably Nyoka's. It was no longer a song of pain, it was a song of remembrance, a melody of life reborn through suffering. Queen Lello stood at her balcony as the wind reached her. The sound wrapped around her like invisible arms, both gentle and condemning. Her bones ached with every note. The fractures of her cruelty, hidden deep within, now throbbed with warmth and rhythm. She fell to her knees, clutching her chest, tears streaming down her face. "Stop," she begged the wind. "Please, I cannot bear it." But the song did not stop. It grew fuller, richer, spreading through the palace like dawn breaking after endless night. The stones of the walls seemed to hum in harmony. The air shimmered. And for a fleeting moment, Lello felt something she hadn't known in years, the faint echo of her own long-lost voice rising to join the music. In that instant she understood the truth. The silence she had worshipped was death itself. And the girl she had broken had carried life in every note, every cry, every wound. When the wind passed, the queen lay still on the cold marble floor. Her eyes were open, her lips slightly parted, as though she had tried to sing again at the very end. Outside, the people of Mbandu awoke to the sound of birds and drums, both returning after seasons of quiet. The forest was alive, untouched by fire, and in the distance, the voice of Nyoka rose once more, strong, eternal, carried by the morning light. And though the queen's name was never spoken again, every time the wind moved through the palace, it seemed to hum faintly, the sound of guilt turned into song, of silence learning to breathe again. Thunder rolled across the heavens as Nyoka stepped into the great hall, her presence a harmony of light and shadow. Her bones glowed faintly beneath her skin, pulsing like strings strummed by unseen hands. The courtiers fell silent, their breaths catching as the air thickened with a strange vibration, neither music nor wind but something older, something divine. The king, weak and trembling upon his throne, lifted his blind eyes toward the sound. "Who walks there?" he whispered, voice cracking. Nyoka did not answer. Instead she sang, a single note at first, soft as breath, but carrying the weight of centuries. The walls quivered. The golden torches dimmed. Every soul in the room felt the vibration echo within their bones. Before her, the mirror of echoes, a relic older than the kingdom itself, began to tremble. It was said that whoever stood before it would see not their reflection, but the truth their soul tried to hide. As Nyoka's voice rose, the mirror shimmered, showing the queen's trembling face, pale and distorted with terror. "Stop her!" Queen Lelo shrieked, clutching at her chest. "Stop this cursed girl!" But no one moved. Even the guards stood frozen, their spears humming softly with the resonance of Nyoka's song. Her melody was not made of words but of memories, of cries in the dark, of firelight on broken skin, of her own heartbeat beneath her mother's cruelty. The mirror cracked. A low wail escaped it like the cry of the earth itself. The king stumbled forward, clutching the edge of his throne. "What is this? What do I see?" In the shattering glass, the truth played like a vision. The queen's jealousy, her cruel laughter as she silenced Nyoka, the forest where the girl had vanished, and the spirits that had taught her to sing again. The king saw it all, the child he had failed to protect, and the woman who had poisoned his love and his home. "Lelo," he breathed, tears blurring his sightless eyes. "What have you done?" The queen staggered backward, her lips trembling. It was her fault. She was cursed, her voice would have destroyed us all. But as she spoke, her body betrayed her. Her bones began to ache, each one creaking like the snapping of a drumstick. From her ribs came a hollow sound, a note of sorrow. Another crack followed, from her arms, her spine, her legs, until her entire being became an instrument of regret. The court watched in horror as Queen Lelo fell to her knees, each movement creating another sound, a symphony of remorse and guilt. "Make it stop," she cried, clawing at her own chest. But Nyoka's song did not stop. It rose higher, transforming pain into justice, sorrow into harmony. One by one, the queen's bones dissolved into dust, and the dust began to hum, rising into the air like faint music. It swirled around Nyoka, soft and mournful, before vanishing into the wind. Silence followed. Then the king bowed his head, his crown slipping from his trembling hands. "My daughter," he whispered, his voice breaking, "forgive me." Nyoka looked upon him with eyes like moonlight. She did not speak, only sang a final note, one of forgiveness and farewell. The sound wrapped around the king, and he wept as his sight returned. Through tears, he saw the girl his heart had forgotten, glowing, alive and free. Outside, the wind carried the last echoes of the queen's song, a haunting hum that would linger forever in the palace walls. The people would later say that justice had been sung that night, that a melody had risen so pure, it turned guilt into dust and truth into sound. And as Nyoka's final note faded into the stars, the mirror of echoes crumbled completely, for there was no need for reflection anymore. The truth had been heard. Peace settled over Mbandu like dawn after a long storm. The rivers ran clear again, and the drums that once spoke of mourning now pulsed with gentle rhythm. The great forest, once feared, once burned, had begun to bloom anew, its trees humming faintly when the wind passed through. It was said that they carried Nyoka's melody in their roots, whispering it to every seed that touched the soil. Nyoka no longer lived in the palace. She had returned to the heart of the village, to the place where her voice had first been silenced. There she built a small house of clay and song, its walls etched with the marks of rhythm, its roof woven with strings of dried reeds that sang when the breeze touched them. Children came to her, carrying flutes made of bamboo and drums made of hollowed gourds, eager to learn from the one who had turned pain into music. To them she was not a queen nor a ghost, but the keeper of songs, the one who understood that every wound carried a rhythm and every tear had a tone. She would place her hand on their hearts and whisper, "Do you hear it? Your heartbeat is a drum. Your breath a flute. Never silence it, even sorrow has its melody." Under her guidance, the people of Mbandu rediscovered what music truly meant. No longer was it just entertainment, it became healing. Farmers sang to their crops and saw them grow stronger. Mothers hummed over their sick children and watched fevers fade. Hunters beat soft rhythms before entering the forest, asking its spirits for safe passage. Even the king, now an old man who ruled from his humble mat, often visited Nyoka to sit quietly by her side and listen to the wind move through her garden. Sometimes, when the sun dipped low and the sky blushed gold, Nyoka would walk to the riverbank. There, she would dip her feet into the cool water, and the ripples would begin to sing, soft, low notes that blended with her hum. Those who listened closely swore they could hear more than one voice, the echoes of the forest spirits, the laughter of her mother long gone, and the harmony of every soul she had ever healed. One evening, as dusk painted the sky purple, Nyoka sat surrounded by her students. She played a hollow-boned flute, not made from sorrow but from remembrance. Her melody rose into the air, twining with the breeze. The children closed their eyes, letting the rhythm carry them into silence. My song, Nyoka said softly, belongs to no one and everyone. It is born from pain but it does not live there. Remember this, even when I am gone, you must keep singing. That night, as stars crowned the heavens, Nyoka lay upon her mat and closed her eyes. Her breath slowed, her body still glowing faintly beneath the moonlight. The villagers found her at dawn, peaceful, smiling, her flute resting across her chest. But though her heart had stilled, her song had not. When the first wind of morning passed through the village, the trees began to hum. The river shimmered with sound. Every drum, every flute, every leaf seemed to vibrate with the same familiar tune, gentle, eternal, alive. The people wept, not with grief but with awe. From that day onward, when the wind blew at dusk, they said they could still hear the song of her bones, the music that had healed their land and their hearts. It was not a song of sorrow nor of triumph, but of balance, the harmony between pain and peace, between silence and sound. And so, the melody of Nyoka lived on, carried by the breath of Mbandu itself. Even death, they said, could not silence her, for her song had become the voice of the world. Generations passed, and the name Nyoka became more than a memory, it became a promise. The melody she left behind flowed through time like a river that never dried. In the evenings, when the orange sun sank behind the hills of Mbandu, mothers would hum her song while rocking their babies to sleep. The lullaby was soft but powerful, filled with a warmth that carried the essence of healing. Even children who had never heard her story somehow knew the tune by heart, as if it had been stitched into their souls before birth. The rivers too carried her voice. When the wind swept across the waters, they hummed a rhythm that matched her bones' old music, deep and steady. Fishermen often paused in their work to listen, believing the river sang only when the world was in balance. The water remembers her, they would whisper. It sings when we are kind. And when the river fell silent, the people took it as a warning, that cruelty or greed had returned somewhere in the land. In the palace, time had changed many things. The walls were rebuilt, the gardens regrown, but one relic remained untouched, a single flute carved from smooth white bone. It rested beside the throne on a pedestal made of black wood and gold. No one dared to play it. The kings who followed the old ruler knew that the flute had a will of its own. It played only when the kingdom was in danger, when injustice whispered in the halls or the weak were forgotten. On quiet nights, guards claimed they could hear the flute song echoing faintly through the corridors, soft, haunting, and impossibly sad. Some said it was the spirit of Nyoka walking the palace again, reminding rulers that no crown should weigh heavier than compassion. Once, when a cruel governor tried to silence a group of poor farmers, the flute began to wail so fiercely that every window shattered. The frightened man fled the land, and the melody calmed, turning into a tender hum that lingered for days. From that time onward, it was said, "The flute guards the throne, its voice is the conscience of Mbandu." Villages flourished under this silent guardianship. Every festival began with the song of Nyoka, played not from instruments but from the people themselves. Thousands would gather, humming her tune together until the air trembled. Old men beat soft rhythms on the ground, and women twirled in slow circles, their movements like waves. The sound wasn't just music, it was communion. The forest joined in with its rustling leaves, and the rivers echoed back, creating a harmony so vast that even the stars seemed to pulse to its beat. Scholars began calling this moment the hour of harmony, believing it was Nyoka's spirit returning each year to remind them of the sacred bond between sound and life. They taught the children that pain was not an enemy, only a note in the great song of existence, that even sorrow had its rhythm and silence its beauty. As centuries rolled on, new songs were born in Mbandu, of love, of victory, of hope, but all of them began with the same ancient hum, the echo of a girl whose broken bones had once healed a nation. Her voice had become the wind's secret language, the river's gentle hymn, and the heartbeat of her people. Even now, when storms rage or the land grows dark, the flute near the throne begins to play by itself, slow, mournful but steady, as if to say, "Do not forget the sound of mercy." And when peace returns, its tune fades into a soft whisper carried beyond the mountains, beyond time itself. So the people say, whenever they hear music born from sorrow or love, Nyoka still walks among us. For as long as songs rise from pain, as long as hearts remember their rhythm, Nyoka will never die.